Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the DanJohnUniversity.com podcast. I'm Dan John, and this is episode 331. We have a nice mix of questions today, a whole bunch more about the armor building formula. And as a reminder to all of you, the armor building formula and the follow-up armor building formula 2 are both available at DanJohnUniversity.com/bookstore. So we're going to start right off with a question from Brad. But before we answer Brad's question, as a reminder, if you have questions, please send them to the podcast at this address, podcast@danjohnuniversity.com. All right, Brad. Brad says, I'm 50 years old and about 6'2", 180. That's good shape. I have been doing kettlebells and barbells for a while now. Last November, I underwent a kidney transplant donated by my incredible wife. I feel so blessed. Brad, first off, good to hear, and kudos to your wife. I tried to help a friend by donating a kidney. Oh gosh, this is 15 years ago, and it just didn't work out. Since I was approved for exercising in February, I have been doing the armor building formula from your book, starting with 1 bell super light. I have now worked up to the point where I can finish it with double 24s and a single 24 for the presses. I got to tell you, Brad, as a kidney transplant recipient, and you're doing that already, that's really excellent. Good for you. My last workouts were 28 ABC heavy day and 74 presses on my medium day, top set of 10. Since I am running out of kettlebells, I am thinking about moving to the barbell version of the armor building formula. Also, it is getting cool here, and I usually do barbells outside. Any suggestions on how to move to barbell armor building formula? Particularly interested in what types of load to start with. Well, one of the things you'll notice if you do read the books is that the double kettlebell armor building formula is this. And then the single bell armor building formula is this. And then the barbell formula is something different. I've always believed that the very first question you ask when you're trying to help someone in training is, what equipment do you have? It looks like you have a good system at home. So just remember that the armor building formula for barbells, it's kind of, it's the tradition that we have in weightlifting. It's the same, but different. One of the things about the barbell program is you do continuous clean and press. And then as you go through the system, you then add later on continuous clean and press followed by front squats, which is really hard. And then, of course, we also do barbell curls with it, which makes everybody I know happy. You ask about load. Now, I work with a Highland Game guy. His name's Eric. He's a great guy. Boy, I think Eric told me the other day, I think he's lost 100 pounds in the past few years, just doing the smart stuff. He does a lot of walking, the caloric restriction he does. He's a big fan of the ABF, but he's also a Highland Game athlete. And when I was working with him so you got a Highland Game athlete. Highland Gamers are big engines generally. We throw the 56-pound weight for distance. And if you've ever thrown a 56-pound weight, you'll find out quickly that it has its own opinions. The 22-pound hammer, it's just a stick. It's not the wire hammer like the Olympics. The caber toss, these are all big events. So you got a big guy moving to the armor builder formula for barbells. And my first bit of advice, and for all you listeners, don't be afraid to take a workout or two with just the empty bar, the 20 kilo or 45-pound bar. Just get through the 5 rounds or 3 rounds, depending on how you want to do it, with the empty bar. If you jump up to 65 pounds or 85 pounds, so just 10s on each side, that's going to be a huge jump because the volume of these workouts is so high. Only recently has Eric gotten just over 100 pounds. And I remember talking to him on the phone, and Eric, thank you for letting me share your story. I just remember me really trying to get him to, come in a little easy. The thing about high reps, and for those of you who use kilos, 20, 30, 40 kilos, those are pretty good weights. And you'd want to probably get yourself to 50 kilos sooner or later. So in the standard barbell set when I was growing up, which was 110 pounds, 50 kilos, that still is a remarkably heavy load for the armor building formula with barbells. So, Brad, also too, I do have minor concerns about your kidney transplant, but obviously you've been cleared, and just keep an eye on things. But I think you would do just fine with going a little bit lighter for a few weeks and just practicing the movements. I think one of the things a lot of people miss when they hear about the armor building formula, of course, all you need to do is go online. And a lot of people, it's like the telephone game, the old game where you whisper something in a person's ear, and then they whisper something in the person's ear, and then you go to 10 people, and then you have written out what the first person said, and then the 10th person says what they think they heard, and it's just radically different. I feel like the armor building formula online is the telephone game. People say, this is the program. I'm like, that's got nothing to do with the program. The first 2 weeks of all the ABF programs should be a break-in. It should be practice with the movements, which can be done with the empty bar or 30 kilos, 65 pounds-ish, and feel good. I think a lot of people go too hard with the barbell ABF because it's like my good friend Mike years ago. We had a complex, and there were 6 exercises back to back to back. I think he was doing complex C, and he was going to do 5 reps. Well, he just looked at it and said, well, I can do 5, I think it was complex C. I can do 5 hang snatches with 185 pounds easily. But what he didn't realize is that it wasn't just that. He had to do, I think I'm right on this, the snatch deadlift. You had to do the hang snatch, the overhead squat, the back squat, the good morning, the row. So, he was very explicit about how horrible he felt after doing 1 round. And I said, I think I told you to use 85 pounds and you used 185 pounds. Err when you move into a new program on the side of, learning and taking it easy, figuring things out. I think it takes about 2 weeks in a program to really start to get a handle on what's the appropriate load for the appropriate reps and sets that you're doing. I've been lifting weights since 1965. And if I start a new program, it takes, I have a coach, as many of you know, and when we change even something as small as an exercise selection, I give myself 2-3 weeks at least. With some exercise you only do once a week. So, like for example, I'm just making this up. I don't have the ability to do this in my gym, but if I'm going from incline to bench press, and then the new program says decline bench press, I would only do that once a week. I would give myself at least 3 weeks of figuring it out before I would even attempt going kind of, even for a set of 8, before going kind of after it. Take your time, keep the loads reasonable, give yourself about at least 2 weeks to practice movements before you kind of lock in on the load, and then you start chasing things up. The fact that you can do the 28s kind of indicates to me that I think you'll be able to handle, that 65, 85, the 30 kilo, 40 kilo workouts, probably in about week 3 without an issue. And then over time, I'd like to see a bump over 50 kilos, 105, 110 pounds. Thank you. As always, the armor building formula, you've got to practice the first week or 2. So thank you. Good question, Brad. Our next question comes from Charles. I have single kettlebells in 10, 20, 36, and 54 pounds, and I've been doing a lot of training with offset weight, front squats, cleans, presses, walks, etc. I rotate sides each set, and I keep the sets even, sets of 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. Do you think this is a good training method? Should I buy another bell in between the 36, 54, so the 16 or 24 kilos, or should I double up on one of the bells like the 16 or 24? I'm a huge fan of this offset kettlebell. So what that means is on this set, in my left hand, I have 16 kilos. In my right hand, I have 32. And I felt this way for a long time. This book here is one of my favorite. And as I was preparing for this today, I started finding myself flipping through this. This is, I would put this book, Perfecting the Press by Kenneth J. And honestly, even though, a lot of people don't like it, I really like Viking Warrior Conditioning, Kenneth J. And of course, The Return of the Kettlebell with what is considered the finest forward in the history. But this book came out in 2009. So in 2009, let's see, 2009, I was an RKC. I was an RKC2. I was a team leader. I'd been an assistant team leader, then a team leader. And Pavel refers to me in this book as RKC team leader Dan John and Jason Brown. This is on page 109. And this is us discussing this idea of offset weights. And Pavel comes up with a nice little progression here on page 109 about how to do it. And Pavel notes that Jason and I were the ones to encourage him to reconsider mismatch bells. In full candor, this takes me back all the way to the turn of the millennium when I trained with the late, great Lane Cannon, who was just a great guy. He was one of my high school football players. I played college football, undersized guy, but just tough. And he had a bargain basement gym. So he would just pick up odds and ends dumbbells. So when we were training together, if you're doing dumbbell benches in his gym, you might have a 90-pound bell here, and the next lightest was, say, 55. And we'd bench, the next set you'd flip them and bench. And it was really something that I learned. First off, I think the offset bells do wonders for teaching technique and there's a phrase in the RKC called taming the bell. Anytime you do a ballistic movement like a snatch, like if you're doing kettlebell snatches with a 10 and then your next set is with the 48, okay, so big jump, you're going to, and then say the third set is with the 14, you're going to figure out quickly that you can do things with the 10 that you can't do with the 48. And so you have to learn to tame the bell, tame the arc, figure out the dynamics. Well, if you're doing like the armor building formula and switching sides every round, so you do a set of 2, 1, 3. On the next set, you go to the other side and you switch your hands. You're asking your nervous system to do a lot of, obviously thinking the entire time. But one of the things, and Pavel notices it, is that there is a weird amount of stress, and whatever you want, in the book he uses the word obliques, but we call it core or column or stability muscles, but you really ask yourself to really control this whole thing. If you're getting hit here with the 32 and catching this with the 16, you're going to find yourself maybe overbelling one side, but it's not going to work. So you have to really keep your chin, sternum, and zipper in line, CSZ line, through the whole workout. I think there's wonderful, wonderful benefits in using offset bells. And that's great. However, after a while, it does help, especially I think when it comes to hypertrophy. Now, obviously, you're always going to be working on, I think you work hypertrophy doing just about anything, really. Your body adapts to adaptions. So, if you took a job as a snow shoveler for a winter and you shoveled snow, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, your body would adapt to that. And then your next job, you became a truck puller, your job was to take ropes and pull trucks back. Your body would adapt to different things there. I think going to double bells and going to the classic armor building formula with the double bells will have value in pure hypertrophy training. Looking good on the beach, looking good in a suit, looking good in a tuxedo. So, when I think about benefits and drawbacks to all of this, the number one thing I'd like to say, everything we do in the gym, everything we do in training, probably everything we do in life, there's cost of benefits to it, risk to reward. And for me, I always think that having this full toolkit. You have the offset bell toolkit. You have maybe a barbell if you want to do the armor building form with a barbell. And then you have this, you try the single bell for the 8 weeks, and maybe you don't like that. Then you try the offset bell and you like that, but you wish you could do this. Having that whole toolkit and having a year-round approach, I think gives you the most benefits with the least amount of drawbacks. None of the programs I think I've ever really believed in work, day in, day out, forever. It is true with the Pacific Barbell Club. We did the same thing 5 days a week for a long time. And I remember, I think it was my junior year, I'd come home from the summer from Utah State, and I just said to Dick, Dick Knott, my coach, who just died recently, and I love that man. I just said, I just need a change. And that summer, we started doing incline bench press. I did back squats for, probably the first time, and it seems like a million years. I did a few other things. I did a lot more snatch grip deadlifts, and I did a lot more hyper extensions. And just in like 2, 3, 4 weeks, I just felt renewed. And one of the things that I think my senior year, when I did get back to Logan, Utah State, and I just said, all I need to do is this. And basically I only did 2 lifts, though I would bench press we had these 2 brothers who were offensive linemen, and I would bench press with them about once a week. They were awesome. They both played professional football in Canada. And but really, I just didn't need to do that much. That little couple of month break where I stopped Olympic lifting 5 days a week and slid over to a more general training program kind of rebooted all the engines again. So when I went back to school and I cut back to just basically the snatch and the clean, I felt great. So that's kind of the thing. That's one of the things I want you to think about, why you want some variation in your training. And as I always say, there's 3 kinds of variation. There's no variation. I told that to someone the other day. They were in the middle of easy strength for fat loss, making progress, and they said, what should I do next? And I said, don't do anything. As long as you're making progress and they're focused on fat loss, stick with it until we come to a jarring halt and we have to figure it out. Mild variation, that's going from the incline bench press to the bench press. That's going from the back squat to the front squat. Same but different. And then there's wild variation. I always use the example of Tommy Kono. By the way, when I do that, I'm pointing at a picture of him, where he would go from an Olympic lifting program to a bodybuilding program to an Olympic lifting program to a bodybuilding program. I think the more tools you have in your toolkit, I think the better things go, Charles. So thank you. If you are going to double up, traditionally I like people doing doubles with the 20s, but the options you're giving me are the 16s and the 24s. Because of the loads that you have, I would say what you call the 35, the 36, I would double up on that first and just see what you think long term. By the way, double 16s in the armor building formula, at least the feedback I'm getting from my friends online, is wildly better than I thought it would be. One of the things that the people using the double 16s are doing is they're trying to get their rounds in faster because the load's lighter. And I think there's some wisdom to that. Okay. One of the great advantages of the kettlebell is what we call density training. Same amount of work, less time. And I think, honestly, the kettlebell is the master density tool. So there you go. Hope that helped. Fun question. And again, I really appreciate the question because it gave me a chance to review this book that I enjoy so much. Much appreciated. We have a question from Spencer. I was wondering what your suggestion is for the weight room warm-ups for a large but varied group of youth and high school athletes on limited time. Looking for a structure all teams can understand that doesn't have to be perfectly identical across groups. Been there. So, I was a strength coach at 2 different high schools. And of course, from, Bigger, Faster, Stronger did 2 articles on our facility, because we really were kind of groundbreaking. And one of the things that really helped us, I don't know if it's in the BFS articles, but one of the things that really helped us when the concept of the warm-up is the workout came out. So we've incorporated some get back ups and the warm-up is the workout, but there is also some kids who want personal time to warm up on their own, laissez-faire style. Okay, so one of the things we did is when we would, well, obviously it's a school, so you have to take attendance. So, I would sit in my chair, I would take attendance, I would ask the students what's going on in their lives. We always started with a short prayer. Lord, the sea is so large and our boats are so small. We would ask about, if we had some students who had, like I remember, maybe a mom with cancer, or maybe there was an auto accident in the family, or just, I've had students whose parents were deployed and things. And we'd always make sure we remember them. And once we did that, I would go over the workout. So take attendance, check in with everybody, get a sense of what's going on in the school. If something bad happened on the school or on the weekend, it did help to have a moment or two to say, is everybody okay? Okay, we made mistakes, let's move on, or whatever. And then my students imitated me because I'd always clap my hands and I'd say, let's go. And they would pop up and they'd walk over, and we had 113 kettlebells. We also had a bunch of dumbbells and a lot of barbells, but I like kettlebells in this warm-up. And we had a lot of competitive kids who would pick up the 32. We're talking high school boys here. And we had some kids who weren't very competitive and would pick up the lighter bells. And ideally, you don't have to worry too much about, exchanging bells. We would always begin with me in a circle, and we would go through this. And later it became known as the cook drill, but we were kind of doing this before. We didn't do the rack. So, everyone would do suitcase carries for a loop or two, then switch hands, loop or two, wait or walk, loop or two. We also did the heartbeat walk. That's where you just keep pressing it as you walk, only one loop. That was a lot harder. And then we would do a variety of, it looked like calisthenics, but it'd be like goblet squats, but it also include goblet squats with curls and heartbeats. Between sets of goblet squats, we always did the hip flexor stretch. So, while we were doing the hip flexor stretch, I had in my notes, by the way, the warm-up is the work. It would vary a little bit every time, but I always kept a kind of a cheat sheet with me because, you forget things, or you also want to emphasize things. And for example, one of the terms we use in mobility work is make space. And I would talk about, okay, on this hip flexor stretch, you want to try to open this and make some space in the hip. We used a lot of planks. In fact, in hindsight, one of the things I wish I had done more of is planks, because planking, isometrics, planking, you really run out of benefits fairly quickly. Once you can plank for 2 minutes, you pretty much mastered planking. But the glute bridge, the top of the hip thrust, in our gym, one of us is overcoming a foot injury, and the PT has them doing, for a foot injury, the PT is having them do these kind of rigid leg raises to waken up the glutes again. And I found that interesting. So you can do like Supermans are a plank. You can do push-up position planks, not back to back to back, but you stir these in. Superman, that cobra position, that scorpion position, the traditional plank. You can do side plank. You could do, and you mix them in with, so between sets of, say, Superman, you do push-ups, between this and that, you do this and that. I know I'm being vague, but there's just so many options. We also had kettlebells, so we would also do push-ups with one hand on the ball and one hand on the ground. Next set, we'd reverse it. We did basically army crawling followed by push-ups. We called those tick-tocks. When I say tick, you move a hand. When I say tock, you do a push-up. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Great little exercise. You would try to mix upper and lower body and those planky core kind of things in. This is also a really good time to practice things like one of the things a tool we didn't have at the time. It's tall kneeling, both knees on the ground, and we would do that swing where you plank here and you throw your hands back. And I got to tell you, and all you say as a coach is hinge, plank, hinge, plank. A minute of that is exhausting, but it reinforces how to hinge, it reinforces how to plank. So in this time, you just keep going and going. My interns would always say how that was the hardest thing. I insisted my interns always did, if we had 3 sessions a day, they had to do one of the sessions workouts. And the reason is doing the workout sometimes stops a lot of questions. Oh, that's why we do this. Instead of me saying, well, what we're trying to build here, at the end of the workout, they're like, I get it. I see what you're trying to do here. Now, at the end of that, however long you have to do the warm-up, before you move into the training session of the day, you're going to need a gear change anyway. That's a good time you can say, okay, you got 5 minutes, I don't know why I just looked at my watch, but you got 5 minutes if you need to foam roll. One of the things, I didn't use foam rolling. I used PVC pipes, the thicker ones, and I would have the kids roll on that. We had matted floors, stall mat floors, but you can also use the thinner PVC pipes to get on, and rub in. If you've seen The Accountant, there's another way to do it. You can foam roll for 5 minutes. You can work on anything specifically you want to do. You can, if you want, it was also a good time for a bathroom break. And by the way, one thing, and this is hard, I learned my first year as a teacher never to question why a kid has to go to the bathroom. I always thought it was strange when a teacher would say to somebody, no, you don't have to go. And I'm sure some of the kids fool around and do stupid things when they get out of the hall. But like criminal justice, I'd rather protect the innocent than just chase after the guilty all day. So that's how I did it. And when you get into the workout itself, I always thought I was the head track coach, so we had the bell, bell lap in track and field. We had the big bell. And I always use that to help. If we're going to do every minute on the minute, we'd always ring the bell on the minute, so that you really try to get yourself away. I know I go online and I see all these hypertrophy and strength programs with 3 minutes of rest, and I'm sure they're right. But when you have 64 sophomores in high school in a room and you give them 3 minutes of rest, first off, they probably don't need the rest. They're 14, but also too, that's where the problems show up. So you want to make sure you keep a good pace. Spencer, I love your question. Maybe sometime you and I can sit down, or we can have a phone call and go over everything else. But I'm going to give you one final piece of advice. As a school teacher, as a school coach, if you're in a school environment, one of the things you can't afford to do is make the same mistake more than 2 or 3 times. So one thing I would recommend, about a month or 2 before the end of the school year, take out a piece of paper and write down the lessons you learned this year. When I in the academic wing, one of the lessons I learned, you never have term papers the last week of finals, because you don't have time to grade the term papers and grade the finals. You just don't. The other thing I learned was, I would give reading assignments, but I'd always have a little quiz the next day on the reading, usually very simple, just true and false questions. And there's more on that too. And I would write these things down in April, because you'll forget the week before school starts in August. And, in the weight room, when you make a mistake, write it down, talk to anybody else you can talk to, whether you have assistants or a group. If an exercise causes injuries, you have 2 choices. You can either reteach the exercise better, or you eliminate it. And I eliminated a lot of exercises that people give me stuff online about, but if a whole bunch of people can't figure out something, a whole bunch of people get injured, maybe it's not a good exercise. So I hope that helped. I always enjoy talking about high school training. It's weird. It's been 15 years since I've done coached at a high school level. I've coached throwers in high schools, but there is something marvelous about impacting people at that age. The students I last taught in high school are now in their mid-30s, which just really makes me laugh. Final note: the other day I was over at the dry cleaners. She was doing some altering for me, and one of my former students came in, and he's 64 years old, and that threw me off. So teaching's wonderful, and every year you get older, and to quote Matthew McConaughey, they stay the same age. It's just amazing. So enjoy, and I hope that helped. Okay, we have a question from Ernie. Ernie says, I'm 55 years old and just started strength training 2 years ago. It's done wonders for my health. Now listen to this, folks. Mobility and other issues. I reversed type 2 diabetes and have eliminated 99% of pain from lumbar arthritis and stenosis. That's impressive, Ernie. I mean, that's just, I got to be careful, when I'm on the podcast. I don't want everyone, is type 2 diabetes, reversible? Well, in your case, it did. And I know some other people have too, but it takes some dedication, and you seem to have it. I currently train 3 days a week using a full body program that utilizes barbells, dumbbells, and cables. I recently found kettlebells and really enjoy the kettlebell lifts. All that background to ask, I would like to incorporate kettlebell training into my off days. Is that possible? How would you recommend doing it? So, if you're getting all your strength work and your other work from your 3 days a week with the barbells, dumbbells, and cables, it might be fun for you at first to learn some new exercises. Like, there's a good chance, Ernie, and I'm just guessing here, you probably already know how to squat, you probably already know how to overhead press. But it might be interesting for you to, I have some videos on this here on my YouTube channel. Start off with my windmill stick exercise and then move into I call it the kneeling windmill position, but it's that middle position in the Turkish get-up, and maybe learn the windmill and the press there. Turkish get-down press would be a fun exercise, whether you need to learn the bent press or anything. But my thought is, if you practice on windmills, Turkish get-down presses, maybe even Turkish get-ups, because they're a nice, you don't even need to use load on those at first. From there, maybe learn how to do the kettlebell snatch, which can be an extraordinary exercise. It really can be. And it's much harder than people think, I think. And there is something, not long ago, someone told me that they're only going to do 2 exercises. I expected to hear squat and press, and they said kettlebell windmill and kettlebell snatch. And I got to tell you, it stopped me for a moment, like, well, that's an interesting choice. But with your idea here of just learning some things and practicing, that's kind of the list I would use. So I'll make it a little bit smarter way. The Turkish get-down press, I think, is a very easy introduction exercise into Turkish get-ups and how to do like the windmill. From there, maybe the snatch. From there, the windmill, and then the full Turkish get-up. The nice thing is, when you're doing any of those exercises, you're sort of doing all of them. A real fun exercise we do, I don't do this one in my own gym, but I teach it at the certs. You do a Turkish get-up, you wait or walk, you do a Turkish get-down, switch hands, Turkish get-up, wait or walk, Turkish get-down. And it really does highlight pinning that shoulder in. If you're a North American, if you're American, United States, there's a real good chance as a male you have a bad shoulder. So it's really a nice way to kind of teach and relearn shoulder stability. And of course, the kettlebell snatch, which we used to call the czar lifts, is just a nice way to test yourself sometimes. It doesn't sound like much, but that 5-minute, 100 reps with the 24 kilo, the standard for the RKC, it's not impossible. And I'm sure other people online are saying it's really easy, but for most of us, most of the time, it's a good test to see if you're actually kind of, whatever the word get in shape, whatever get in shape means. If you can do that, I'm pretty sure that you've reached in shapedness. Fun question, and thank you. Okay, Josh asked something I talked about. Now, he's going to talk about the 3-minute goblet squat challenge. Okay, so the actual challenge is 6 minutes, but the 3-minute is a good workout. So the goblet squat challenge, I realized years ago that with kettlebells going heavy, obviously armor building formula do the double, but with the goblet squat, you can get so much out of this challenge. And real simple as this. You have to have a clock with a second hand. I guess you don't, but that's how we do it. So here's how we do it. When the second hand hits 12, your job is to stand up, squat back down. When the second hand hits the 6, stand up, squat back down. And now you ask, what do you do with those other seconds? Well, your job is to sit at the bottom of the goblet squat. On the 3-minute test, you would start, boom, 1 goblet squat, sit. You sit for 29 seconds. 1 goblet squat, sit. 1 goblet squat, sit. 1 goblet squat. Okay. And it's weirdly hard because you're expected to be in this position the whole time. In this position, your arms are fired up. All your cobra muscles are on fire, and this entire area here, your core, your column, has to be lit up. And also, too, you're getting a nice stretch. There was a nice little video the other day on YouTube about a guy who took a challenge of sitting in the bottom position every day for a month for quite a while. I can't remember the amount of time. Sorry, but so now that's what Josh is asking. I tried the 3-minute goblet squat challenge you mentioned last podcast. 30-second hold in bottom position with a squat in between each hold for 3 minutes total. I could barely do a minute and a half with the 16K. I am a 34-year-old dad of 2 who's trying to get back into regular lifting training after nearly a decade of inactivity interrupted by occasional flirtations with lifting. That's a great line. I can easily goblet squat the 32, and I can even press it for a single on each side. So my inability to do the 3-minute challenge with the 16 indicated to me that it might be worth my time to focus on the basics and rebuild my foundation before I do anything else. I'm inching to do some other workouts like that lift and sprint, and the one where you do the goblet squats and you finish with the hills. He's talking about that. How would you turn the goblet squat holds into a progressive program? And what should be my goal? 3 minutes with a 32, or, well, really, the goal should be 6 minutes with a 24. That's the goal. I have it in a couple of my books as a challenge. A couple of years ago, when I was working with kind of standards in kettlebells, I discovered I was being really influenced by my background in the barbell. And as much as I think that kettlebells, dumbbells, machines, barbells, and the whole world of strength training are all about the same, they're still different enough that the rules had to change. One of the things we do is, a Turkish getup with a half a glass of water as one of the standards. Well, there's no weight in half a glass of water, right? But if you move at all, we call it you get baptized, okay? The 6-minute goblet squat drill, I mean, it really does just emphasize, and this is the key, what your weak spots are. One of my old training partners, who I don't really talk about enough, John Price, great man. His coach at University of Washington, he was a discus thrower too. He used to tell him, the strength coach, that the chain is only as strong as the weakest link. Yes, it's a cliche, but it's true. So in your case, Josh, I'm wondering if your weak link isn't your strength. It's simply your ability to lock on and plank, to squeeze. The word we use in the gym all the time is anaconda strength. And as I'm speaking, a new movie's coming out. Anaconda strength is that squeeze strength, that inner tube pressure. The 1964 Olympic hammer champion talked about the key to throwing the hammer. Wasn't big arms or a big squat. It was the ability to, have like an inner tube here that counters all the physics of the ball out there. And ever since I heard that term, it really changed the way I look at throwing. If you ever go to a Highland game and flip a caber, and if you guys want to see me flipping a caber, just type in Dan John Pleasanton caber, and it'll show you me winning the Pleasanton Highland Games, which is a big deal, and I'm proud of it. It's not on my channel, but it's fun because you can hear the fans screaming at the judge, which I think is funny. So when you progress with goblet squats, you can do it a lot of ways. Yes, you can add load, obviously. But in your case, Josh, I'm wondering if when you're doing your squats, you drop to the bottom, you push your knees out with your elbows, pause, grunt, stand up, and start to slow down the pace of your workout so that you're trying to build up, the anaconda strength. For those of you interested in the 6-minute challenge with the 24, that's for men. One of the things you'll find is that when you get to minutes 4 and 5, you're gonna sense things in your body. There will be shaking. That sounds like a movie title. There will be shaking. But I'm about to use the word illuminating because as you're shaking in certain places of your body, it gives you a kind of a roadmap to some of the areas that need more work. One of the reasons I became such a fan of the suitcase carry is that one of the easiest ways, and this is a good idea for you too, Josh, to help with this particular test is doing the suitcase carry because it gives you a chance to remind the body how to stay locked down under time and load. Okay, fun question. And when you do make it, video it and send it to me. I'd love to see it. All right, thank you. Okay, we got a question from Alex. Real simple question. I feel that my mobility is a bit behind, especially in my hips, quads, and hip flexors. I'd like to improve it, but I'm not sure where to start. Well, Alex, I think one thing about mobility, and you don't give me your age or anything, but gentle listeners, if not now, when it comes to things like lean body mass and mobility. I think you can kind of catch up on a lot of things in life. I have this little workshop where I say 2 things teenagers hate to hear: don't get fat and don't get debt. I would also might be a good idea to add don't get immobile because if not now, when? Because mobility, your body just seems to mummify as we age. So for me, this is how we do it. Between literally every single set of when I train in the weight room, and come train with me and you'll see it. Between every single set, we do original strength. Now, let me just give you a general view. Right now, I'm doing a lot more cross crawls and backwards walking and kind of a skipping kind of thing where I turn my head like this because I'm working on I'm experimenting really. But generally, what we do in our gym is between every set of push, we do a neck nod movement, whether prone or seated or 6-point. Between every pull, we do a big neck rotation movement. And even here, you can see me already moving into, we call these seated twisties. You can see me moving into seated twisties. You're not pushing, you're not forcing, you're using your eyes to lead, tongues in the roof of your mouth, hard to do and talk, and you're taking your time to move. For hinges, bird dogs, or its cousin, which are also known either as speed skaters, We call them fro zones in my gym because I think it's funnier. But if a bird dog goes this way, a speed skater goes back. So if I'm in that 6-point position, and I bird dog, my left heel goes straight back and my right hand goes forward. In a speed skater, my right hand comes back, and I always remind people, try to have your hand touch your heel. It's pretty hard to do. And then you get that pumping motion that makes you look like a speed skater. For squats, in between every set, it is any squat family member, and I do this also with even leg extensions. 6-point rocks in the ground. That's when you get on your hands, knees, and feet, and you do that kind of assisted squat. And any loaded carry, we always follow with the cross crawls. That's that march where your right hand hits your left thigh, left hand hits your right thigh, and you kind of march like this. On Thursdays, we spend an entire hour just on mobility. So I lift weights 3 days a week, and I do mobility in between each and every set. Oh, by the way, I also hang for 30 seconds, and I sit in the bottom of the goblet squat for 30 seconds each and every workout. Tuesdays is my long, now I'm just walking because I'm trying to do body comp work, but before it was my ruck or my heavy hands day. By the way, and heavy hands really is very similar to some of the movements we see in the gait pattern in original strength. So, and I've been experimenting lately with, I bought very cheap clubs, the 1 pound cheapies, where I'm doing exaggerated throwbacks with the hand. You can also do it with a 1 pound, a small dumbbell or just a plate. As I walk, I throw my hands back as hard as I can. I find it really, really helpful for my shoulders. Almost every day of the week, I do one other thing, and I'm right here, literally right there is my sauna. And I got some good advice from Physiognomics on this, and I've cooled my sauna off quite a bit. I only know what in Fahrenheit. I imagine it being 44 or 45 in Celsius, but I keep my sauna now at 150 or less, and I try to go longer. And when I'm in the sauna, I do a lot of seated mobility work. I think the key, Alex, is that you need to have mobility work blended into your training between every set of an exercise. I think that's really good. And then a specific day. Now, if you decide to sign up for a weekly yoga class, I think you cover the basics too. I know hot yoga isn't as big a deal as it was, I don't know, say 15 years ago. And there's good reasons for it, But there's a whole new wave of hot yoga studios showing up in the area here. I'm a big fan of doing stretching in heat. I think there's, I can only quote Brad Pilon when it comes to the magic of heat in the human body. I think it helps with body composition, and I also think it helps a lot with mobility. And if you don't have a sauna, if you can take a hot bath, I would say 2 to 3 days a week. And depending on the size of your bathtub, now if you have a hot tub, you can do more. But at least work on, it might be hard to work on your quads, hips, and hip flexors in a typical bathtub like I have upstairs. But you might be able to get some extra, this kind of work where you're working your shoulders through a little range. Don't forget to work your fingers, your wrists, your ankles, and your feet, your toes. All of them. There's a lot of bones in this area. There's a lot of room for love here. But the thing I think I'm trying to get across here is, at some level, you have to organize it. It can't just be, kind of willy-nilly. Last thing before I go on this, and I'm just learning this now, but I don't. We have this metal scraper upstairs, and I'm just going to use my scissors, okay? But one thing I am surprised how you can also do this with PVC pipe. That's the way we used to do it. But if you can do some basic, deeper skin rubbing, and then work on your mobility, and especially if I'm doing this in the sauna, it seems to really help me with my mobility. For whatever reason, that seems to stick a little bit longer versus say, I don't know, sometimes I'll go to a chiropractor or get a massage, and you stand up and you feel great, but by the time you get home, you can already feel things nudging back together. If I'm in my sauna and I stretch out these things, I do this little bit of scraping, and then I work on my mobility, it seems to hold a little longer. I'm not sure I even know exactly what I just said. I understand it, but I don't know if I can explain it well. So those are my ideas, and I hope that helps, okay? Thank you. All of you folks, if you can, instead of sitting around playing on your phone on your rest periods, do mobility work. I think you'll be much happier. Okay, we got a question from Graham. Question regarding your up to sets principle. It's basically where rather than concentrate on a fixed number of reps or sets, you just work towards a total number of reps. And I got that from John Powell. And I got to tell you, I use it in the book Mass Made Simple, where you take your body weight, 225, for example, or that's kind of or 185 or 205, whatever. Make sure it's a standard barbell number. And I say up to 50. Well, set number 1, you might get 8 reps. Set 2, you get yourself up to 17 reps. Set 3, you go for it and you get to 30. Set 4, you decide that was a bad idea, you get to 34. Set 5, you get back to 41. And on the last set, you're like, oh, let's just finish this nightmare, and you get to 50. That is an up to workout. It also works really well. I think that, in a general workout, you should do 15 to 25, reps for hypertrophy. Well, a good way to figure this out is, for example, if you have a bell, let's see, we're going to use kettlebells, but I'm pretty sure I could do 25 reps with the 10. So one set of 25 got all my reps in. With the 16, I don't know, say 19 and 6 gets me up to 25. With the 20, it might be 1 or 2 sets of 10 and a set of 5. With the 24, it might be a set of 10, a set of 7, oh boy, a set of 5, and get to 25. That's the up to concept. One of the things I discovered generally especially if you're doing up to 25, if you're doing 3 to 5 sets to get the reps in, you're probably in the correct load. The other thing that's nice is it gives you permission to put the bell down when the reps look bad. So let's go. It's basically rather than concentrating on a fixed number of reps or sets, you just work towards a total number. Any suggestions on how to best progress with this style of programming? I really enjoy this as my training schedules varies due to work and family. Okay, very common with our listenership. So some days I lift before 6 a.m., whereas other days I might not be lifting until 11 p.m., so fixed reps and sets are hard to gauge. Yeah, anybody who's ever trained in the morning before like work and then had a day where you could train at 3 in the afternoon, it's like you have a different body. Yeah, I like that. I know the obvious answer is just go by feeling. I would say that, but that's okay. That is when it's light, up the weight, or do more total reps. But I'm just curious if you've had any nuggets of wisdom. One thing, I have yet to find a set and rep scheme that wasn't at least, that's interesting. When someone tells me that, some researcher said that 2 sets of 20 is the best way to train, I mean, of course, train for what? That's, I have this set of magazines down there that we got in high school called Conditioning for a Purpose. And I think that, what's your goal? What's your purpose of training? I got really strong, with Dick Nottmeyer, anything above 3 was endurance work, I don't think I ever did a set above 3 for a long time. Singles, doubles, triples, actually triples, doubles, singles. So, everything works, Graham, and all my other gentle listeners. Everything works. And I think the nice thing about this style of training is if you pick a number like you're going to do 15 reps, total reps today, it's pretty obvious to me that, at least the way I would think, okay, that's a heavier day. If I'm doing 25, now I already gave you the parameters. If it takes you 25 sets to get the 25, that's way too heavy. Okay, if it takes you 2 sets, is there a value in doing 2 sets, a set of 13 and a set of 12? I can, yeah, because one of my favorite ways of training is sets of 8 and sets of 13. Fibonacci numbers, obviously. I get, today in my military presses, I did a set of 13 and a set of 8. The 8 was heavy, and the 13 was the next set, and it was stepped down. And I got to tell you, when you get to 8 reps on your way to 13, the body starts talking back to you. So the first thing I would think about is you want to be in that 3, 4, or 5 total sets scheme for most of us most of the time. So if you find yourself at a 6 a.m. workout, I would lean into more of the 5 sets to get there. If you have a later workout where you're feeling a little bit better, or I'm not sure, or however it works out for you, maybe lighten up and think more of the 3 or 4 sets, or even the 2 sets. Up to training, so up to 50 reps in the back squat, up to 25 reps in the push-pull or, squat, I guess. It's great because it really does reflect more how we are as humans. We're not machines, at least not yet. There are some films that scare me about machines taking over the world, but I think doing something like this gives you some real good insights and feedback, especially those of you who have busy jobs, and you do, kids, life. It gives you a lot of flexibility to get your reps in. And I'm the first to admit there are times where I'll be doing a set of, this happened about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Again, it was the military. I was doing a set of militaries, and my right side kept hitting the rack. And it made no sense to me. Clearly, there was something going on with me that day. So instead of doing the 8, I think I had planned, after 3, I put it down, kind of stepped back and said, what's going on here? It was a small thing. I adjusted, and I finished my set of, I did 5 more because I just want to get on with it. Having that flexibility up here when you have a real life, I think has value. When I read people online, everybody seems to have these perfect workouts and perfect lives and perfect diets. But for the rest of us, if you're like me, sometimes, doing a set of 5, followed by a set of 6, followed by a set of 9, followed by a set of 3 is the real world. Okay, thanks. Fun question. I really should probably spend more time thinking about organizing that, but I'm a big fan of this. So thank you. Okay, I've got a question from Jamie. And Jamie says, huge fan of your podcasts and books. I've cycled through your programs the past 5 to 6 years. I wish I was exposed to your philosophies while I was in college. He's a 30-year-old male now. But nonetheless, I'm glad I found your stuff. There is no movement I enjoy more than swings. That's interesting. When I'm actively training them, I feel strong in my day-to-day life, jiu-jitsu, golf, or whatever else I can get myself into. I feel like pound for pound, I get the most bang for my buck with that exercise. But listen, folks, he does something I like. I built myself a T-handle out of some 3/4-inch steel piping so I can load it up with weights and perform 2-handed swings. My question is this: what are your thoughts around programming heavy swings? With good, safe form, would someone get a lot out of 50% plus body weight swings with smaller rep schemes? There is limited information on why they truly help. Up here, I think they're here, are Pavel's, gosh, it was his great little magazine he came out with for a couple of years. Yeah, here they are. Power to the People newsletter. And in one of the newsletters, there's a picture of me. This is fun. This is kind of, Dan John has a few things to say. That's funny. But there's a picture of me using my T-flange in the back. Before I had a kettlebell, and my first kettlebell I got at the RKC convention because I took second in the throw for distance. Big Dan, another guy named Dan beat me. But in my defense, he's like 8 inches taller, okay? So I came home with a 28 kilo bell, which became the bell I trained for my first RKC with. Before then, I did all of my training with dumbbells, barbells, and then I used the T hinge. I got to tell you, the pictures of me, usually I stacked up 4 25s. That's how I would go. I'd put a 25 on, do a set of swings, usually 20 to 25. I found them much easier because at least the one I had, the handle swung freely. And I got to tell you, folks, I don't know if I got the grip strength some people get out of kettlebells, but I sure enjoyed it. And then I go 25, 50, 75, and then 100. I also use 35 sometimes, which bring the weight up to 170, and it barely fit on the system I used. And I got to tell you, the first thing is if you've ever thrown the Olympic hammer or the Scottish 56 or the Scottish 22 hammer, it felt like throwing those big implements. I also think it helped me with my caber. And as that weight gets to here, you are countering with everything because that load is flying up and you're hitting the brakes with your heels to hold that thing from pulling you across the lawn. I think there's great value to it. You said 50%. I'm guessing you could go maybe a little higher with 50% with T-handled swings. Rep schemes, maybe at first, the first set, try 5 with it, get a sense of things. One of the things you'll find when you do T-handled swings is that on your warm-up sets, your first sets, it's not unusual to kind of get tugged forward. You almost feel like you have to run after the weight. And that's just, you have to lock yourself into the plank. You could certainly get yourself in the 10, 15, 20 range. If you get yourself to 25 with 50% of your body weight, I think that would be a really strong effort. One upside that a lot of listeners might miss, the grip is easier with the T-handle. Because the handle, the weight rotates through. So your grip does hold a little longer. And I think that can be an advantage, especially if you're like a thrower or even an American football player. I imagine rugby would be the same because you're working the big engine and you're not at the expense of your grip. If you don't mind, Jamie, take a picture of your rig and send it into the podcast. I'd love to see what you put together. Thank you and good luck. We have a question from Brian. I've been training with kettlebells for about a year now, and I'm on the 3rd round of the armor building formula available at danjohnuniversity.com/bookstore after having bought both of your armor building formula books, among others from danjohnuniversity.com. Thanks for the free ad there, Brian. I think things are going well as I work my way through ABCs and high volume pressing, but I have a constraint. I work out in my little home gym in my basement with somewhat low ceilings, and I am tall enough that I end up having to overhead press between joists. You know who also have to do that? Olympic champion Tommy Kono. And remember, folks, for every disadvantage you think you have, it can also be an advantage. But we'll talk about something else. It wasn't so bad before the smaller 16 kilogram cast iron bells, but now that I've moved up in weight, my presses have been really slowed down as I gingerly guide my bells into the ceiling to avoid making contact, not always with success. While I'd like to believe that I'm going to get the most benefits, there is also something to be said for the extra time under tension. Again, every disadvantage can be an advantage. I force myself into. I do wonder if I'm missing something from the explosiveness I see in videos of others doing overhead presses. Would you be able to comment on the value or lack thereof of slow controlled presses versus explosive movements? I'm going to give you a piece of advice. The other day I was on a podcast with Peter Lakatos, and he's a great guy, Hungarian kettlebeller, really quality guy. And he asked me about, if I can only do 5 exercises. And I always get back to the half kneeling press. And Brian, I think this might be your answer. Half kneeling is simply this. Now, I tend to do it a certain way. Half kneeling means one knee is on the ground, the other foot is up in like that hip flexor stretch position. But traditionally for me, if my right knee is down, I press with my right hand. My left knee is down, I press with my left hand. I hope I said that right. Right knee down, right hand press, left knee down, left hand press. And by the way, if you're going to ask me if you can do double bells, yes, you can. And it's amazing, because what you get out of the half kneeling press is you get weird amount of stability, but you also get a lot of mobility work on that hip flexor. And it's all free. It all comes in one big package. So I like the idea of constraint all the time. I'm a big believer. I taught in Catholic high schools here in Utah, and we had a phrase, and I still love it. The reason we use uniforms, and we had a speaker say this one time: what you compress expands. So anytime any of you have any limitations, instead of thinking, oh, woe is me, think what you compress expands. So your limitations on having to, get yourself into that between the joists and then slowly bring it down and then aim, there's value in that. However, between that and the half kneeling presses, I think you found yourself a good solution. Are there advantages to doing presses more explosively? Well, I've seen a lot of people bench press where they hit their chest as hard as they can, and then they arch their hips up and they throw the weight up. Whether that really works the muscles they're wanting to work, or it's just breaking the rib cage, I don't know. But I think this little combination, Brian, might be a really good idea. And let me know what you think. Well, that's it, folks. I hope you learned something today. I certainly did. It was really nice to go back through these materials for some of these questions. Remember, if you have a question, please send them to the podcast at this address, podcast@danjohnuniversity.com. Each and every week I sit down and answer your questions, and I love it. I really enjoy hearing the stories of our readers and listeners also. And a lot of you really do inspire me to keep on going. So thank you. And until next time, let's all keep on lifting and learning. Thank you.